What's up guys, my name is Ace, and the weekly challenges are back from Modern Warfare 3, and the week 1 reward for Season 1 of Black Ops 7 is the Ballistic Knife. And in today's video, I wanted to break down exactly how this works, and it's also essentially just going to be turning into our first full melee comparison, because I want to see how it stacks up against the regular knife as well as the Flatline Mark II. Now the gameplay in the background is just my first time using the Ballistic Knife. Instead of lobby shopping around and spending hours to get like actual decent gameplay with it, this is just what it looks like using the Ballistic Knife against half decent players, especially if you're primarily just trying to shoot them with the Ballistic Knife. But with that in mind, let's dive into our melee comparison to see how it stacks up against the other melee weapons as a melee weapon, and then of course we'll look at its unique ability, which is the ability to shoot a knife. So when it comes to our melee attack, this is how the various melee weapons stack up. Keeping in mind, these are just for standard attacks. There's also a charged attack you can use on the knife and flatline, but you can't do that with the Ballistic Knife, and you can't do that with the butt of your gun, so we're not going to be diving into that today. We're just looking at a standard swing of your melee. If you just use the butt of your gun to melee somebody, it's going to deal 90 damage, and that means that'll be a 2-hit kill by default, whereas for all of the actual melee weapons themselves, the knife, flatline, and now Ballistic Knife, they will all be a 1-hit melee kill. Next, a really important stat with melee weapons is the amount of time it takes to actually hit your target. From the moment you start the animation, like you press the button and you start like sweeping your knife toward the enemy player, how long does it take for that hit to actually register? And therefore, in the case of the 1-hit kill melees, how long does it take to kill that enemy from the moment you activate the attack? And as you can see, with the gun butt, it's 350 milliseconds, so it takes quite a long time. The standard knife is the fastest at 225 milliseconds, and then the flatline and Ballistic Knife are both a little bit slower at 250 milliseconds, although much faster still than a gun butt. So not quite as good as a regular knife here, but really not that much worse at the end of the day. Then another stat that's less important but still worth considering is how long does it take to hit twice? So if you have two enemies standing side by side, for instance, this is how quickly can you recover from the first hit before you can get your second hit. And as we can see here, once again, the regular knife comes out on top at just 600 milliseconds between hits. The Ballistic Knife is a little bit better than the flatline at 700 milliseconds, and then the flatline is 750. Then after that, when it comes to our melee range, they do actually state our ranges in the menu, at least for the regular knife and flatline. However, those values don't really line up with what I test in-game when I use the in-game ping feature and I test melee ranges there. And I think that's just due to the fact that the ping feature will ping to the center of the enemy character model, whereas your melee range is actually determined by how close you are to any part of their body. So that range is always going to be a shorter range than what I test. But just for consistency's sake, and to allow me to test things that don't have a stated melee range in the menu, like the gun butt or the Ballistic Knife, I'm going to be sharing all my tested values here as well. The Ballistic Knife has the worst melee range out of all of these. It's even worse than just using the butt of your gun at just 1.5 meters. And this is a clear downside to using this relative to the others if you're using it with the intention of actually meleeing your target rather than shooting them with that knife. And then finally, one last stat to look at here is your maximum hit angle. So how far off target can you be aiming as long as you're within range? How far off target can you be aiming for it to still lock on and get the kill on an enemy player? And in all of these cases, it's 30 degrees. So there we go. When it comes to the actual melee attack of the Ballistic Knife, it's really not that great, primarily due to the lower range than all of the other options. But that makes sense. You have to do something to compensate for the fact that it's got that great bonus relative to the others that can't kill at a longer distance at all. But then another important element, especially with your melee weapons, is your movement speed values. Because if you want to optimize your routes getting from point A to point B, you're generally going to want to switch to your dedicated melee weapon, since that's going to give you a faster sprint speed, for instance, than most, if not all, of the guns in the game. I believe there are ways you can build guns to get just as fast, if not maybe a little faster. But generally speaking, one of the purposes of swapping to your dedicated melee weapon is to get that faster movement speed. And as we can see here, the regular knife is going to give you the fastest sprint speed at 7.8 meters per second, followed by the Flatline Mark II at 7.7, and then we've got the Ballistic Knife at 7.5. Clearly, it's the worst in this area as well, so if you often use your dedicated melee slot just to get an opening route or get from point A to point B as quickly as possible, the Ballistic Knife is your worst bet here. Now, of course, as I said, there's a reason they made it weak in these areas relative to the others, and that is we get a big extra utility. With a Ballistic Knife, you can not only use it as a regular melee to just swipe and hit the enemy player, you can also shoot knives at a distance. So let's have a look at that. With this, you spawn in with 3 Ballistic Knives by default, And after you fire them, they can be retrieved. So you just have to run over them and it'll automatically pick them up, put them back in your inventory. And also, if you're using the scavenger perk and you pick up a pack, that will also replenish a ballistic knife. And it allows you to have up to 6 in reserve as well as the one that's currently loaded. So 7 total if you're using scavenger, which is great. Now, when it comes to our rate of fire, we can shoot a ballistic knife every 1.7 seconds. That's a pretty long delay between shots, especially in Call of Duty terms. If you're right up in the action, a lot can happen in 1.7 seconds. You can get killed many, many times over within that amount of time. So it's not the most forgiving when it comes to this. However, we can slightly speed that up if we use the Fast Hands perk. That will cut it down to 1.55 seconds, which is still pretty slow, but at least a little bit faster. Now, as far as the accuracy goes, this is perfectly accurate whether you're aiming down sight or not. So if you do aim down sight with this, all it does is it helps you zoom in a little bit more, but you'll be just as accurate with or without. And the knife itself does travel fairly slow, and there is some drop with it as well. Now, what I've noticed is it does appear this is zeroed at like 27 meters or right around 27 meters. Meaning at that exact range, this is where you aim literally dead on target. It will drop right into where your dot is pointed. Whereas anything closer than 27 meters, it will actually hit a little bit higher than what you're aiming. And as you get closer and closer, the higher it's going to be. So that's something important to know if you're using this. You may want to aim a little bit low if you're within 27 meters. Not by a huge margin, but just slightly low. Whereas anything beyond 27 meters, this is where you're going to start hitting below that initial point of aim. So you're going to have to aim a little bit high in those situations. Also, our sprint to fire time on this is about 225 milliseconds. And that's a bit on the slow side. Even for something like an assault rifle, they're going to be able to come out of sprint and hit you first with a shot before you can fire your ballistic knife. But then again, it is always a one-hit kill if you hit with that ballistic knife. And that's pretty much it. I mean, the ballistic knife is a very straightforward item in the game. At the end of the day, when it comes to my thoughts on this, I love the fact that they added it to the game. It makes for an interesting challenge and a totally different way to play and approach the game. But as you can see in the gameplay in the background, it is very far from being competitive. If you're playing against anybody that's half decent at the game, you're basically just going to have to get lucky with the odd hit here or there. And more often than not, you'll just get absolutely destroyed. But another factor I like about the ballistic knife is the fact that we can have sticks and stones in the game, and it's the proper version of sticks and stones that uses the ballistic knife. And I think it's awesome for modes like that. When it comes to whether or not I'll be using this, no, I won't be using this at all unless I just want to mess around. As of right now, I'm sticking to just the standard knife in my dedicated melee slot because I like using it for opening routes and to get from point A to point B a little bit faster. And the regular knife is going to be the best bet for that, whereas a ballistic knife is the worst for that. Now, of course, those are just my thoughts and opinions on the ballistic knife in Black Ops 7, and this is where I want to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about the ballistic knife? Do you guys think I'm being a little too harsh on it? Do you guys think it's better than I stated here? And do you guys plan on using it much going forward? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.